Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. So the tutorial we're making today is this beautiful style on your screen. I hope you love it. So the name is Nani and you're welcome to my channel. If you're new here, welcome. I love you. To the returning subscribers, the people that are making me happy. I love you so much. So for this tutorial, I'll be needing my pattern paper, my black cups. I'll be needing a black cup to make this beautiful tutorial, right? So this is cup 34. The size I'm working with is size 34, and I'm working with the bust size of 34.5. So that's why I'm working with bust 34. Now you need your regular boning, the type of boning that you can sew on. So the next thing I'll be using is my skin tone mesh or my skin tone net. So you can see how it is on my body. So the person I'm working with is a lot darker than I am, or a little bit darker than I am. So that goes well. So this is the Ashoke for the gele. Okay, so it's an Asoebi kind of stuff. So this is the lace, the main fabric, the oga bata of what we are doing here today. You can see how beautiful that pink lace is. The next thing is my underlay for the lace, and I'll be using this fabric for the standing cape, okay, or the standing sleeve is a cape. So I'll be using that for the standing cape. And these are my pattern masters, my pattern maker, my tape rule, my calculator for calculating and most efficiently your measurements. Okay, so you need to make sure that you have taken accurate measurements, very fitted, because the style we're going to make, you don't need to have it not to be fitted on the body. So right here we'll go straight to drafting so that I don't waste any of your time. Right, so I'm going to start by using my pattern maker to make a starting point at the beginning of my pattern paper. So guys, if you already know how to draft a basic bodice, you can skip the tutorial to where I start drafting the pattern proper. But if you're a beginner and you want to see the beginning of this pattern drafting, just do well to stay with me while I carefully draft out this pattern. And I don't want to rush it, because if you're a beginner here, I want you to understand everything I am doing so that in subsequent tutorials you will be following up, or okay, you won't be left out. So I've marked my starting point. So from there, I'm going to take the bust point measurement. Guys, the bust point is the measurement from the shoulder to the top of the nipple. That's the bust point. So I've taken it on both sides. The next measurement I'm taking is the under bust length, and I'm taking it from the shoulder to where you have your bra boning at the under part of your bust. The next measurement I'm marking is my half length, and it's from your shoulder to your natural waistline. When the client tilts by the side, there's a bend at the waistline. So when the person tilts and you see that bend, make a mark at that point and measure till that, from the shoulder till that point. That's where your natural waistline is. Okay, so that's where the basque, because this is a basque effect, we're giving it a basque effect, so that's where the basque will start from. So underlining the lines I have made, this is bust point on the bust and half length, right? So the next measurement we need to take is our basque length. So for your basque length, you want to do between 4 inches to 5 inches. Okay, nothing below 4 inches. Okay, 3.5. No, but nothing below 4 inches and nothing above 5 inches, except you want it to be very down to your V line, or your, the V line of the woman body, right? So I'm making my basque length to be 5 inches, 4.5, but with half inch seam allowance. All right, so the next thing I'll do will be to mark out my shoulder line. So the shoulder I'm working with is 15 divided by 2, that's 7.5. I'm going to mark 7.5 here, and I'll come down by 7.25 for my chest line. Now I got my chest line by dividing my bust measurement by 6 plus 1.5 inches. So that's how I got 7.25, which is my chest line. So I've gone ahead to mark my chest line, also impute the shoulder line at that point, and cross it out. So that up there is the chest line. So we have chest line, bust point on the bust, half length, and your basque. So I'll mark my neckline. I want a neckline width of 3.5 inches by 3.5 inches as the depth. So I'm marking 3.5 inches across this part, just to square it up and make a box. Then from that box, I'm going to tilt or come inwards by 1 inch. You can see you could do between 1 inch or 1.5, or 1 inch is okay. Then I'll use my curve ruler to make a U-shaped neckline. So this is how I cover my neckline. You can just use your pattern maker to just curve it out. Then afterwards, you're going to be doing your shoulder slope of 1 inch. For an adult is 1 inch, for a child is around half inch to 3/4 inch. So after that, you can go ahead and do your armhole, but I like to draft out the body pattern first. So you'll be needing your bust span, which is also the nipple to nipple measurement. You're going to measure horizontally from one nipple to the other. So whatever you have, you're going to divide that by 2 inches. Then you add half inch for same allowance. So I've marked that on the bust point. Sorry. Now on the under bust and on the half length, and with the back's length as well, you're going to subtract half inch. So let's say for instance you got 4 inches, you're going to subtract half inch. So on the under bust half length and back's length, you're going to be marking 3.5. Then at the nipple area or the bust point, you're going to have 4 inches. This is for instance. Okay, so whatever you have as your bust span, divide that by 2, add half an inch to width, mark that on the bust point. Then on the under bust half length and of course your back length, subtract half inch from whatever figure you got. So I've taken this line up off to the chest line. Now on the under bust lines, I'm marking 2 inches. Okay, and on the half length and on the bust, okay, towards the side, I'm marking 2 inches. And this is for my dart. I'm working with a bust 34.5. Okay, so that's how I did the dart for 2 inches, so that way it will be enough to cup the body, the bust. Okay, you can also divide the distance between your bust point and under bust into two to get whatever you need for your dart. Okay, so if the distance between your bust point to under bust is 3, it means you use around 1.5. Okay, so I use my pattern maker to curve from the bust point to under bust. Then at the chest line I took a dart of half inch, and I'm just going to connect it like so. Right, so this is our pattern. This is the bustier effect that this is going to have. Mind you, this is not a corset, it's just a bustier. They were going to be using trimmings to cover up the bust area. Right, so everything you see now is not just corset. Okay, a lot of people are uncomfortable in corsets. Right, so on the chest line I'm going to divide the bust measurement by 4 and mark it there, then add my 2 inches seam allowance. I also measure my dart intake and mark. So my dart intake is half, so I'm replacing half inch there. Then I'm putting my 1 inch allowance to close up the dart, okay, to sew up the dart. Then the next thing I'll do would be to divide the under bust length, the under bust circumference by 4. Okay, add my 2 inches allowance, add my 2 inches dart replacement, and 1 inch for coupling the dart. Okay, so that's what we're going to be doing. On the half length, I'm going to mark the waist measurement divided by 4. So whatever you have as your waist measurement, divide that by 4, mark that on the half length, add your 2 inches seam allowance. Okay, then add your 2 inches dart allowance and your 1 inch for coupling the darts together. Right, so you're going to connect these points into a straight line. Right, so you can see then from the half length you move down to the back length, because the back length is also at the waistline. So that's what I have just done. You can see what it looks like. So I can now go ahead and draft my armhole, measure what I have left from my shoulder slope, mark the middle of that point coming by half inch, then use my ruler or my curve ruler to draft out my armhole. So if you know how to make a basic bodice or a bustier, this should be really easy. Okay, you can skip up till this point. Right, so the next thing would be to do the plunge neckline. Okay, you can see that it has a plunge neckline, so you're going to measure the cleavage of the person. Okay, how deep the person wants the neckline to be. Right, so if you don't care, you can do about 2 inches after your under bust, but my client wants hers to be at least 1.5 inches above her under bust. She does not want to show too much. Okay, so her cleavage she wants is around 7 inches. So this is how much she wants to expose. Sorry. So if you want a deeper or a plunge neckline, you can come down by 2 inches from your under bust. It's going to give you that more defined plunge neckline or yoke. You get what I'm saying? Right. So from the armhole side, okay, I'm just going to come up by around 1 inch at this area. Okay, from the chest line I'll go up by 1 inch. Then at the middle parts where I have the dart, I'll go up by 2 inches. You can see that. You can also do 1.5 depending on how curvy you want this to come out. So that 1.5 to the 1 inch I marked from the chest line, I'll just connect like so. You can see that you're also going to connect to how deep you want the neckline to be. So let's recap this. From where you have the dart, you can go up by 2 inches or 1.5. Then from the chest line around where you have your armhole, go up by 1 inch. Then connect these points like so using your curve ruler. then bring it to where you want the neckline or the depth of the plunge neckline to be. Right, so if you want it to be deeper, you're going to be needing a longer curve ruler, and you just connect like so. So different strokes for different folks. So my clients want something a little bit moderate. She doesn't want it too plunge and to expose, although we're going to be using net at that part, but she still wants something she would wear to church, right? So that's why we're doing this. Now this upper part becomes our yoke. You can see, so when we cut this part out, we're going to be using our skin tone net at that point. Now I want my shoulder width to be 3 inches from the shoulder. I'm going to come inwards by 3 inches towards the neckline, like so. So it means that my neck width is going to change, right? It's going to get wider because I want my shoulder width to be only 3 inches. Okay, I don't want the sleeve or another part. Okay, because it's not going to have a sleeve, so I don't want that part to be too wide. I just want it to be 3 inches. So I have redrafted my neckline, right? So you can just do whatever works for you or whatever you prefer. Right, so I'm just going to go ahead and connect this dart up onto where we have the style line for this project. Okay, you can see, just connect it like so. Make sure your darts or your lines are well defined. You can see, so that is how you go about drafting your plunge neckline, right? So you can make this as a corset, a bustier, whatever you want to make. It is just the same procedure, right? So you can see, remember, you can do your plunge neckline directly from your underbust, 2 inches underneath your underbust, or whatever your clients want it. Okay, the most important thing is customer satisfaction. Well, the most important thing is knowing how to do it, and then the second thing is to know how to satisfy your client so that you come out with something very beautiful and appropriate, right? So this is what we have. I'm going to go ahead and start cutting, right? So this is how we cut. Just cut out from the back length, then cut out through this part. Now before you do this, I like to cross check to be sure that I have all my measurements, my seam allowances, my dart replacement, my dart seam allowance. All these things are very, very important, right? So whatever measurement you are dividing, if it's the waist, divide the waist by 4, add your normal 2 inches seam allowance, add your dart replacement, then you add seam allowance to join the dart. Seam allowance to join the dart is usually 1 inch seam allowance. Okay, so that is it. Make sure that all these things you cross check before you put your scissors. Now sometimes it's easier because you're working on a pattern, and if you identify it on time, you can redraft on your pattern, sorry, before you trace or transfer to your fabric. Okay, so that's why making patterns are also very, very advisable. All right, so I'm just going to cut out through my yoke like so. You can see, then at this shoulder area, I'm just going to add my 1/2 inch for joining the seam, the shoulder seam. I always do this. Even my neckline seam allowance, I'm adding 1/2 inch to the neckline, right? I like to do this when I'm cutting, because sometimes when I'm transferring to my fabric, I usually forget the neckline seam allowance and the shoulder seam. I always forget. Okay, I can add other seam allowances, but I usually forget that shoulder seam and neck width, except when I'm intentional about what I'm doing. Like I'm very, very, so most times I tend to forget, right? So that's why I like to do that. If there is chance or space on the pattern paper, I like to do that as well before I cut. And that is also one of the reasons why I like to leave 1 inch above my pattern paper. Okay, 1 inch before I start drafting, so that I can add those measurements or those allowances, right? So now this is what we have, center front and side front. Okay, so I hope that this met you well, like you understand it. Please, I'm in the comment section for you to ask any questions that you may have. Right, so this is what we have. Very beautiful. So I don't want to have any excesses, so I'm making sure that I cut directly on my measurements. Okay, I don't want to have any excess. I just want, when I take in my seam allowance, everything is going to be snug and fitted on my clients. Now for you to make your basket waistline, you're going to place the center front on the side front to cover the bust dart. You can see, to cover the bust here, sorry, not the bust dart, right? So you can now make your basque. Well, I like to make my basque after I'm done joining. I don't like to cut. But if you like to do it on your pattern, from your half length, come down by 1/2 inch, then you use your curve ruler to make the type of basque you want. If you want it a bit U-shaped, you can do that like so. If you want it V-shaped, you can just make a straight line from the down part to 1/2 inch after your half length, right? So this is if you want to cut it on your pattern then transfer to your fabric, you're free to do this, but I like to do this directly on my fabric by the time I am done joining, so that if I have any shortage, I can know how to work around it. All right, so now we moved over to the back pattern, right? The back is a lot easier. We've done pattern drafting for the front. Now you know how we drafted our pattern, so it's exactly the same measurement, but we're not adding any zip allowance to this. But I have some excess at this part, and it is for my modesty panel, right? Because I want to put something in between so that my client's back is not showing when she wears her dress, right? So I'm just going to fold it in so I don't confuse you, right? So this is my chest line and this is the half length. Okay, so the half length I'm working with is 17 inches. I need half inch in my allowance. I have exactly 17 here, so when I'm transferring to my fabric, I need to make sure to add half inch to the back, okay, for the length. Right, so I've measured my waist divided by 4 plus 2 inches, my bust divided by 4 plus 2 inches at the chest line and waistline respectively. I've cut out, I've erased my dart because I don't want to have a dart at the back of my dress, okay? But if you want a dart, make sure to add your dart replacement, okay? You can as well cut it out and add your dart same allowance as well so you can join. But I just want this for the back, like so. This other part I folded in is my modesty panel, okay? The panel that sits, is going to have a loop at the back, so you don't want your client's back exposed except the person requested otherwise. So that is for my modesty panel. So I'm just going to start making some adjustments to this back pattern. All right, so for my loops at the chest line, I'm going to go inwards by 2.5 inches. You can do as much as 3 inches, but I want to do 2.5 inches, something a bit moderate. Right, so 2.5 inches is fine for me, works fine for me. Then at the waistline, I'll go inwards by 1.5 inches. You can also do as much as 2 inches, but 2.5 inches and 1.5 inches works very well for me, so I'm just going to stick with that. I'll connect that into a slanted line. All right, so upwards 2.5, downwards 1.5. So this is what I'm cutting out. Remember, you don't add any zip allowance. Instead, you remove from the back pattern for your loops. Remember, I want my neck width to be 3 inches, so I'll do the same for the back. Mark out 3 inches, then do my neckline for the back. Now the neckline for the back is just going to be just for the shoulder strap, so just like so. I'm just going to connect from there to the chest line, like so, to where I have that 2.5 inches, so that's how my neckline is going to be. It's going to be a lot deeper. Then from the chest line, I'm going to go up by 1.5 inches. That's fine. So 1.5 inches. Then I'm going to connect it like so. So this is just going to be my yoke. Only this part would be my yoke. It's just going to give a very beautiful style. I'm sure you've seen this in some outfits, right? So this would be the yoke, and the lower part will just be our main fabric, right? So you can see the yoke and the main fabric. So this alteration is really, really beautiful. It comes out really beautiful. So 2 inches to 1.5 for this part is okay. So I did 2 inches. Okay, you can do 1.5 as well. Like so, I like to mark out the things I have done so that in case I forget, you can just see them right there on the paper. Now remember, I took 2.5 inches at this part for the loops. I'm going to extend this to the other side for my modesty panel. I want to draft out the modesty panel now. So I took 2.5. I'm going to multiply that by 2, and that gave me 5. I'm going to add between 2 to 3 inches to that. So 2 inches, 3 inches is fine. So I'm adding just 3 inches. If I have an excess, I can always trim out at the end of the day, right? So multiply whatever you've taken out by 2, then add 2 inches to 3 inches. For the lower part, I did 1.5. So 1.5 times 2 is 3 inches. So I'm going to go ahead and mark, sorry, 1.5 times 2 is 3. Okay, so I'm going to add 2 inches to that, or 3 inches to that. Okay, so this is my modesty panel. Okay, I'm just going to slanted it, so that's my modesty panel. I'm going to cut that out. Remember, for the upper part, 2.5 times 2, that's 5 inches. I marked that and added an extra 2 to 3 inches to it. For the lower part, 1.5 times 2 is 3. I added an extra 2 to 3 inches to that, then I slanted it as well. So this is my modesty panel. You can see, so this slanted area is going to be the part that would sit very close to the fabric, okay, to the main fabric. It's going to sit at that point that would cut out. So I like to notch them so that you can see. All right, so by the time I cut the slanted part, you're going to see the part that would sit there. Right, so I'll just go ahead and cut like so. Please don't get confused. By the time I'm done cutting out the main pattern for this back, I'm going to place the modesty panel in a way that you'd see exactly what it is and how it should be. So I'm taking out the 1.5 from the lower part, 2.5 from the upper part, then I'm going to cut through for the neckline like so. So this part is unwanted, we don't need it anymore, so I'm taking it out. Then I'm also going to take out my yoke like so. Very beautiful yoke that I'm going to be using my skin tone mesh to do. So this is just what we have for the back. It's a lot easier, straightforward, straight to the point, and really beautiful. Okay, so this is just it. So I'm going to cut out the shoulder slope. Then whenever I'm drafting on my fabric, I need to make sure that I add my half-inch seam allowance up and down the yoke. Okay, now this is the modesty panel. So the slanted part is just going to be the part that would face. You can see that's why I turned it upside down, that's why I notched it. So that's the part that you're going to sew, and the other part that I notch is the upper part, right? So I'm just going to pin this together. Whenever you make your patterns, use your pin to hold it together so that you don't lose one piece. If you lose one piece, my sister, you started from the beginning to draft your pattern, right? So I'll just go ahead and transfer all these my markings to my fabric. So I have done that. I'm just going to show you what I have. So this is the side front. You can see SF, that side front. Now you can see I have just added half inch to the upper part like so, where I'm just going to join my tool or skin tone mesh to. Now for the center front, I've added this is going to be, I added half inch on both sides because I want the center front to have an opening that I can join, so it's going to be open. So I've cut fabric and lining, right? So I have 4 pieces, 2 pieces for the fabric and 2 pieces for the lining. I'm using this silk fabric as both fabric and lining, you can see. So for the center front, sorry, for the center front, I only added half inch, okay, to the center front area. The side already has my allowance, so the only one side, that's the center front, the center, that's the only part that has seam allowance. Now this is the back pattern, okay? So the seam allowance I have is half inch at the upper part, half inch by the side, and half inch at the lower part to fix it or attach it to my skirt pattern. Okay, so this is it. I also have 4 fabrics cut out, 2 pieces for the main fabric and 2 pieces for the lining, right? So I also have my modesty panel cut out. I have cut out 2 pieces and make sure to notch the parts that I need to notch. You can see what it looks like. I added half inch all around the modesty panel. Now this is my yoke for the front. It already has allowance at the shoulder area and on the neckline, so I only added half inch at the lower part of the yoke like so. You can see I only added half inch all around the lower part of the yoke. The neckline and the shoulder area already have allowance added, right? So this is it. Now I'm just going to show you the yoke for the back. You can see this is back yoke. It has the half inch allowance at the lower part, the half inch towards the neck area, and half inch to join the shoulder seam together as well. Then the next is my skirt pattern that I've already cut offline. It's just a marmite skirt that has a train. I have a tutorial on how to make a marmite skirt with a train here on my channel, so I'll drop the link to the description box below just so that this video doesn't get too long. So this is the back pattern. The one I showed you previously was the front, so this is the back, and that is how I have cut this tutorial. So we're going to see in the next video, which is when I'm sewing. Love you, bye.